So what I want to talk about today is really about Arbitrum governance in the DAO. And I guess at the foundation, my role mostly focuses on research and education. So hopefully this is an educational talk. So topics to discuss today. So what I want to talk about first is the journey up to Arbitrum governance. Because in order to govern something, it needs to exist. So what was that journey like for Arbitrum from an outsider's perspective? Because I only joined 3 months ago, but I've been following it for a very long time. The second is, why should we care about the Arbitrum DAO? Why are DAOs useful and why should we care about that? And finally, what's the relationship between the DAO and the Arbitrum Foundation as well? So let's talk about the journey. Raise your hand if you're familiar with this YouTube video. Has anyone seen this before? A few people, maybe the off-chain people have. So this is a video from 2015 by a bunch of students working with Ed Felton. And they were presenting about something called Arbitrum, which is really, the bisection protocol with the fraud proofs. And this is back in 2015. And does anyone else know what also happened in 2015? The launch of Ethereum in July 2015. So as Ethereum was launching, Ed and his students were considering, how can we build scalable computation, verifiable computing. So that's pretty cool. 2 years later, Ed and a bunch of PhD students, including Harry and Stephen, they took that idea, and it's a bit like drawing the owl. You have the circles, and then you actually draw the owl. And so they designed the protocol, they built their proof of concept, they wrote the paper, they got it published, and they really drew all the little details of how you could, build the Arbitrum virtual machine. And that's about 2 years worth of work. And does anyone else also know what happened in 2017? The original Plasma paper came out. Does anyone remember Plasma? Trying to see what age I am now. There you go. You don't really need to remember Plasma, by the way. It was a bit of a sunk cost for 2 years. But it led to what we now know as rollups. But Plasma was a very interesting 2 years of designs. Then about 2 years later, given the work that they've done for the previous few years, they raised some seed funding and they created off-chain labs. And also around 2019, does anyone know what happened this year? Because I only remember this, that's why it's not on my slide. 2019 was the year of the rollup. That's when Barry Whitehat released the rollup GitHub repo for simple payments and demonstrated that rollups can work for payments. But now the off-chain labs raised their funding and they're going to go build Arbitrum. And over 2 years, you can imagine any early startup, they have early pivots, they work out what they should be building, they work out what a sequencer is, and then eventually they launch Arbitrum 1. They looked at their work in the rollups, they took their Arbitrum work, they combined it, and then they launched the Arbitrum 1 network. And does anyone remember that day? Does anyone remember the Arbitrum 1 day? Who was there for that? Raise your hand. There you go, now we're getting hands, that's awesome. Woo! Finally getting the generation now. And then, 2 years later, they released Nitro, and then obviously in March of this year, they released the DAO, and obviously the foundation as well, where I finally joined the team, on the Constitution. Now, what I want to really highlight here about the birth of the DAO is that you have this team, Off-Chain Labs, who worked in this project for about 6 to 7 years. They built their entire startup around it, and they took the technology and they give it away to the DAO and to the foundation. These live deployments of these networks that they worked so hard to get adoption and users, and they give it away to the community. How many tech giants would actually do that? They give away everything you worked on to a community. So I think there should be a round of applause for them even doing that. I think that's a big deal. So I want to give a little round of applause to them. Crypto's a very funny field that way. So what they give birth to is basically the Arbitrum DAO and the Arbitrum Foundation. The DAO is a collection of token holders who can vote on issues, and the foundation's here to represent Arbitrum and to support the DAO in its operations. But first, let's focus just on the DAO. Why should we care about DAOs in general? And now, just for a bit of reference, I'm a techie, I like protocols, I like understanding how something works. So when I came to the foundation, I learned about the DAO, I'm a bit like, what's a DAO? I sort of knew about DAOs, but I didn't really understand why they were useful. There's a lot of skeptics out there about DAOs. So let's take a step back. Okay, let's figure out why a DAO is even useful before we talk about the Arbitrum DAO. The way I like to think about it is that if you consider open source software, or at least publicly available software, anyone can go to the GitHub, anyone can read the code, and anyone can understand how a project works. Now, maybe you find a bug. You look at the code, you find a bug, So you fork it, you create your PR, and then you submit it back to the repo. Then the code owners, so this is the code owners for the Go Ethereum repo, they'll review your code, and then they may merge it to the main branch. And finally, with open source software, anyone can take your code, they can download it, they can deploy it, and they can deploy it as many times as they want. This is the instructions for deploying Go Ethereum, Gith, for your own private network. So that's cool. That's like, the journey of open source software. Anyone can read, anyone can modify, and then anyone can run it as well. But what happens if there's only one meaningful deployment of the software? What do I mean by this? So we consider blockchain networks. We have Bitcoin, Ethereum, Arbitrum, Polygon, even Cardano, Avalanche. All of these networks, they all have a GitHub with the repo, with the code, but realistically, there's only one meaningful deployment of that code. So then the question is, who's authorized to issue an upgrade to that network? How do we govern that live deployment of the software? And how do we guarantee that everyone can agree that this should be upgraded? And over the years, we've all worked towards this idea of decentralized governance. So initially, there's always a central authority. So this is the old SourceForge for the Bitcoin project back in 2010, 2009. Satoshi Nakamoto was basically the only maintainer for about a year, and Satoshi Nakamoto got to decide what was Bitcoin. Every time there's a new code fix, he would authorize to say, this is the new version of Bitcoin. By 2010, he gave it away to the community, to the Bitcoin core devs. And very similar for Ethereum and very similar for most of these blockchain projects. They always start off with this central authority who builds the project, rapidly iterates until it's at some point where they can give it away. Now, for layer 1 blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum, they have this idea called rough consensus. And it's twofold. One, the reason why you have rough consensus is because it's sort of like a hot potato. No one really wants to dictate how you upgrade the network, so they pass the buck to someone else. And two, it's a very abstract, vague concept because they want to prevent governance attacks. For something like Bitcoin and Ethereum, it should be exceedingly difficult to upgrade the network. So in practice, how it works is that people will converge, they'll talk about the idea, then on the network itself, the block producers, the miners or the stakers, or the nodes on the peer-to-peer network, they'll issue a signal out. They'll signal to say, I'm ready to upgrade. And if enough people on the network signal that they're ready to upgrade, you then end up with a flag day. So who remembers the 15th of September for the merge? Who was excited? Yeah, like, whoa, the merge. The merge had a flag day. This is exactly how the merge worked. People signaled on the network that they're ready. Then by the 15th of September, flag day was hit, the upgrade happened. That is rough consensus in a nutshell. But now there's a third approach. And the third approach is just, well, instead of having a vague governance process, can you have an explicit governance process? So it's very easy to measure and understand when an upgrade should happen. And the first example of this was Tezos in 2019. The bakers could vote to upgrade the Tezos network, to change some configuration on their network. And now this is basically what DAOs are going to do as well. So for DAOs, it makes a lot of sense to pursue the explicit voting process. Because it's a smart contract that lives on Ethereum, it's very difficult to fork that, so your only option is to have explicit governance. But wait, voting? If you have this voting protocol, do not just harm the security of Arbitrum and rollups in general, anyone who relies on a DAO? And I think this is like what most people don't really understand, and that's why I want to talk about it now. When you think of a rollup system or any blockchain system, to be honest, there's the day-to-day operation. What is the protocol that secures the network? What is the protocol protecting the assets? Is it proof of work, proof of stake? Is it the rollup protocol? And that's the day-to-day operation. That's why the protocol and the implementation is so important, because it's always continuously protecting the funds. Now, in a rollup like Arbitrum, if you want to protect the Arbitrum network day-to-day, the goal is not to have 10,000 validators or 100,000 validators. We get that from Ethereum already. The goal for Arbitrum is to prioritize access, so that anyone in this room could step up, issue a challenge and save the day. So So it's more about prioritizing access so one honest party can step up and protect the entire system from an all-powerful adversary. But the backstop, so if this day-to-day operation breaks down, or maybe you need to change it, you need to upgrade the protocol, that's where governance steps in. And governance is the ultimate backstop that secures a blockchain. Okay? And for governance, what you really want to prioritize is diversity. You want as many voices in the room as possible, and you want to maximize that set of parties as well. So everyone can have a voice in governance and help to dictate how the protocol should be upgraded long term. So that's really the security of rollups, Arbitrum, and generally speaking, any blockchain system today. You have rough consensus for Bitcoin and Ethereum as a governance mechanism. Oh, broken slide. Whoops. All that alpha coming out. But now the whole point here is that for these rollups and DAOs, you have this voting protocol. You should attempt to have a diverse population, and then you have this explicit governance process. And that's hopefully what the Arbitrum DAO will achieve over time, towards decentralization. So what should the DAO vote on? We're talking about the idea of voting protocols, but what explicitly could they actually vote on? So, in my mind, the Arbitrum DAO has two missions. The first mission is that Arbitrum is the DAO is the ultimate defender of the protocol. Any upgrade that gets proposed to the DAO's job is to audit that, even pay for audits, do whatever they can within their realm of possibility to really defend the protocol from any malicious upgrade. So even when Stylus, as was discussed before, when Stylus is proposed to the DAO must evaluate this on its merit before deciding to accept it. The DAO is the defender of Arbitrum. The second goal is that the DAO does have a treasury. All of the revenue from the Arbitrum network goes straight to the DAO. And they also have their, obviously, ARB token treasury as well. And their job is to manage this treasury towards the betterment of the Arbitrum protocol. And that's up to the DAO members to decide how they want to spend those funds to support the protocol. So let's just say you're a wonderful person who wants to participate in the Arbitrum DAO. What type of proposals can you submit? And there's two different styles. One is a non-constitutional proposal. And typically that's for funding or guidelines. So if you want to issue a code of conduct, you could do that by a non-constitutional proposal. Or if you want to upgrade the smart contracts itself, you would then have a constitutional proposal. And the difference is really the voting threshold. You need 3% of all votable tokens to pass, and 5% of all votable tokens to pass there. Okay? Now, what's smart contracts? So let's assume you're doing the constitutional AIP. What smart contracts can be impacted here? Well, first, I guess, you can do funding, you can spend the treasury. 2, you can update the network configuration of any of the smart contracts. You can upgrade the core contracts of the bridge itself. And 3rd, you can actually update the governance contracts as well. So the DAO, the key point here is that the DAO underpins and has the authority to upgrade most of the smart contracts that underpin, Arbitrum today. The DAO is extremely powerful, and there's no rollup out there today that matches the power of the DAO. Only Arbitrum's really gone this far in terms of, decentralization via the DAO. So how does the voting protocol work itself? So what's really exciting about Arbitrum is that it has this on-chain governance process. So if you submit a proposal and it gets accepted, it will then be executed directly on Ethereum itself, directly via the blockchains. You're not relying on some multi-sig to process the upgrade for you. It is all done via the blockchain, the smart contracts. So how does it work? Let's go through it step by step. So the first one is that first you need a proposal. You need to actually recommend an upgrade to the network. So you can submit the proposal on the forum, and generally speaking, you should wait 3 days at least for some feedback. So people can actually discuss your proposal before it goes to a vote. Then you can put it on Snapshot as a temperature check. This is optional, but is recommended because it's free to cast your vote there. You should really only be proposing a vote to the DAO via the on-chain suite if you think it's going to pass. If it's not going to, if it feels a temperature check, there's no point even submitting it to the on-chain vote. And then the last step is obviously the on-chain vote itself. So here you can see Etherscan There are the votes for a recent proposal, so all the votes are cast via the on-chain smart contracts. Tally is a user interface that can help you cast your vote. So here you can see a successful proposal for EIP2 or AIP2 and all the delegates who voted for that as well. So again, everything happens on-chain, but thanks to Tally, we have this wonderful, cute user interface where you can really see how the voting's happening in real time. So let's assume everything goes well and the DAO has accepted your proposal and you're going to hopefully upgrade the smart contracts in Arbitrum. What an exciting day that will be. What are the next steps after that? The first step is that there's a time lock. So the moment your proposal passes, you have to wait 3 days. Why do you have to wait 3 days? One is to protect users. So let's assume I'm a user, I'm a whale. I look at this proposal, I'm like, crap, how did that get accepted? I then have an opportunity to withdraw my funds from Arbitrum and bring it back to Ethereum. So there's always an opportunity for you to exit. But two is also for the Security Council. So when the DAO was set up, 12 individuals were appointed to become members of the Security Council. And every 6 months, there's going to be a new election to replace 6 members of the Security Council. And we'll talk about more about the election at the very end. But what can the Security Council do? Why should we care about them? So first, they have this 3-day window to veto their proposal. So 9 out of 12 of the security members have to work together in order to actually veto this proposal. And there's reasons why they may do that. Maybe it breaks applicable laws, or maybe it harms the integrity of the network itself. Maybe it's a governance attack, it's a malicious upgrade, and we've seen that before in other DAOs, and so they can step in to stop it. I think that actually happened to Tornado Cash. I think they accepted a malicious proposal that, of course, could then steal all the funds in their smart contract. 2, let's just say the foundation becomes aware of a critical bug that harmed, or there's a risk that user funds could be stolen. The Security Council can step in and immediately fix that bug in the smart contracts. Now, if you can imagine if this happened, they would have the issue report to say exactly why they did this. It's a very, trusted role, requires 9 out of 12. And then third, they can also do non-emergency upgrades. So let's just say there is a bug, it should be fixed because everyone would agree that this is an annoying bug that has to be fixed. 7 out of 12 security members could work together. It takes about 2 weeks, but then they could get that upgrade into Arbitrum as well. So that's the Security Council in a nutshell. But anyway, 3 days have passed, they haven't vetoed your proposal, and we're all very excited now for it to actually, be executed. So there's 3 different ways a proposal could be executed. First, maybe your proposal was a guideline or, informational. So in this case, it's a no-op operation. So that's how AIP 1.1 was passed. It was basically just emitted an event on the blockchain where anyone could see the vesting wallet for the Arbitrum Foundation. So that's how that proposal was executed on-chain. The second approach is that maybe you're just going to transfer funds. So the treasury lives in Arbitrum 1, and then the funds can be moved from the treasury straight to the author of the proposal or whatever the proposal dictates. Then the third step is your proposal wants to upgrade the core contracts of Arbitrum itself. People like to describe this as sort of a round trip. That's why I put Mr. Bean there in a way. He's sort of doing a round trip. But it's not really a round trip as we're going to see. But basically, what we mean by a round trip is that in Arbitrum, there's 3 blockchains that we care about. Arbitrum 1, Ethereum, and Arbitrum Nova. And smart contracts live in all 3 blockchains. So when we say round trip, it really means that the upgrade has to go to Ethereum first, and then afterwards it has to go to the correct chain where the upgrade actually happens. So in this case, the upgrade, the executable code, will be sent to Ethereum as an L2 to L1 message. And that takes about 7 days. Then once it reaches Ethereum, guess what? There's another time lock. There's another 3-day waiting period where the Security Council could then again step in case they have to protect the protocol, to veto it. And that's also to provide another window for users to withdraw their funds as well, around some edge cases. But eventually we got to the point, okay, we're going to execute this upgrade. How does it happen? So if it executes on Ethereum, it can just execute directly. So in this example, you might want to modify the inbox smart contract. It'll execute directly on Ethereum and that's it. If it's on Arbitrum 1, this is the round trip. It goes back to Arbitrum 1 and then it executes the upgrade on Arbitrum 1, at that time. An L1 to L2 message. And if it's on Nova, maybe you're changing some configuration, it will then send a message from Ethereum to Nova and then execute the upgrade. But of course, maybe you're going to upgrade all the smart contracts at the same time. So one example might be you want to install a new security console. You would upgrade the contracts on Arbitrum 1, Ethereum, and Nova all at the same time. So that's really cool. That's how the on-chain governance contracts work in a nutshell, without going into the nitty-gritty details. So if you want the nitty-gritty details, you can look at Chris's diagram. I wanted to make an awful joke how bad it is, but it's actually very informative. After I understood how the process worked, this is actually a very detailed chart. But of course, it's not very welcoming to newcomers. As Henry posted here, he thought it was an awesome diagram, but I'm a bit skeptical. I think it's a bit sus. But anyway, that's the on-chain governance contracts. So have they been used yet? What proposals have people voted on for the Arbitrum DAO? So as most people are aware, AIP1 was rejected, full out rejected by the DAO. It's a great way to start the relationship. Afterwards, we had AIP 1.1 and 1.2. That was then eventually passed by the DAO. So that was really nice. That was our vesting contract. And of course, modifications to the Constitution. But more recently, there was a contract proposal proposed by Alchemy to enable account abstraction for the sequencer. And that has actually passed now on Tally, and the sequencer should hopefully be updated soon in order to support account abstraction. But that's really cool. Alchemy wrote a proposal to the DAO. The DAO looked at it, got on Snapshot, it got voted for, got on Tally, it got voted for. We weren't really even that involved in it. It was really just between Alchemy and the DAO. So that's really exciting to see that this actually did work in practice. And now there's 2 new proposals around grants that are going through this process. And we'll just have to see what happens afterwards. So finally, just to start wrapping up a little bit, what is the relationship between the Arbitrum DAO and the Arbitrum Foundation? So first, the Arbitrum Foundation is accountable to the DAO. We are the only foundation, to the best of my knowledge, that has a vesting contract that's under control of the DAO. Our treasury will vest over 4 years continuously. The DAO can decide to accelerate, slow down, or simply remove the vesting contract wallet or the vesting wallet altogether. There's really no other rollup out there that is fully accountable to their DAO in this manner. And that's thanks to AIP 1.1. I think it's a really great way to set the scene for, our relationship with the DAO. Now, from the foundation's perspective, we're accountable to the mission statements. Our goal is to, technical advancement, both implementation and research, educational initiatives, and then strategic grants and partnerships. And that is ultimately what we'll be accountable to the DAO. That is what our treasury is. We were given this treasury to execute on these mission statements. Now, the way I like to think about the relationship is that we like to think that DAO is the brain that can make decisions, and we're the hands. So if the DAO makes a decision, our job is there to operationally support them in their decision. So maybe enforcing service level agreements, it could be providing KYC services, whatever the proposal needs, we're there to do our best to support them in that. Now, because our job is to support the DAO with the decisions that it has made, our job is to be neutral. We are not here, we will never ever endorse a proposal that's submitted to the DAO. Our job is there to help proposals that have passed the process. So when your proposal passes, we are then there to help you. We'll step in and help you, execute on your proposal in whatever manner that we're required to do so. And finally, what's really exciting, because we have a constitution, I like to think of the constitution as an API that formally specifies how the DAO can communicate with the foundation and vice versa. So if you want to upgrade the communication protocol or upgrade the interface and how they interact, you can submit a proposal to the Constitution, that will formally dictate, a new process of how the DAO and the foundation interact with each other. So again, the DAO is the brain, we're the hands. Because of that, we're neutral. We're here to assist the DAO in any manner that we can. And of course, the Constitution defines our relationship and how we can communicate with each other. So we're here to work together, clearly. Now, one thing I wanted to highlight, and I think this is really unique to cryptocurrency setups. I can't think of any other Web 2 world entity where this is possible. Maybe I'm wrong. But let's just say you're, a bystander and you think, I think that, you're sitting there, you're on your computer, you just finished playing your video games. And then you think, the foundation's not doing a very good job. They really suck at doing X, Y, Z. Or maybe the foundation isn't actually doing X, Y, Z. You think, the foundation should take up this extra job. They should be running this, this initiative, but they're not even doing it. Well, if that's the case, then what's really exciting about this DAO is that you can submit a proposal to the DAO about the initiatives that you care about. If it gets passed, you can have some funding to help you with the proposal, and you could even issue yourself a grant. So you're not even doing it for free. You get the funds, you do the proposal, and you execute on it, and we're here to help you with that execution. So if you're not happy with what we're doing, or we're not doing something that you care about, then you can work on a proposal and then do it yourself, and we're here to help you with that. And I can't think of many Web 2 companies where that's possible. It's a bit like saying Coca-Cola sucks. You can't, Coca-Cola's not going to help you, they're just going to ignore you. We're here, you submit a proposal, it passes, then we're here to help you with whatever proposal you want to execute on. So I think that's really exciting, and most people aren't really aware that these opportunities exist. So just to wrap up now, what's coming up next? So last week, the Ambassador Program was released. So if you know any university students or clubs that want to get involved, you can point them to the Ambassador Program and they can get started. The second one, and probably for me is a bit more time critical, is that the foundation has sponsored both Tally and Off-Chain Labs to work on an on-chain election software for appointing new Security Council members. So the first election is scheduled for the 15th of September, and in an ideal world, the DAO can then cast their votes on the blockchain directly for the nominees they care about. If they pass, then the Security Council members will be installed via the governance contracts into the system. So it will all occur via on-chain governance. So the proposal for the security election is on the forum. So I recommend to go look at the implementation and leave comments and feedback. But two, there's a second proposal where we're proposing to modify the start date of the elections. We're going to get, hopefully, we're asking the DAO for consent in order to, delay/modify the start date of the election to give time for this implementation to be ready. So the smart contracts are in progress, the audits are going to be in progress, and it's a very tight deadline. So hopefully, people can read that proposal and leave feedback on it as well. And finally, this is going to be announced later today, but the foundation is finally releasing their grant program. It's going to be focused on small grants for both developers and infrastructure. So that'll be released later today. So hopefully everyone here can help, spread the word. We can help start issuing some grants to wonderful developers to build an Arbitrum. So that's my last slide. So thank you guys for listening. I'll be around anyway.